Watercolor Painting, Module 1, The Basics, a video by Emma Yankovic. By the end of this video, you will be able to identify the parts of a paintbrush, arrange your workspace, prepare watercolor paper, hold your paintbrush properly, clean and maintain your paintbrush, wake up your palette, and load your paintbrush. Apply watercolor to paper, basic brushing technique, wet on dry, wet on wet, diluting, layering, and removing tape from painting. Part 1. You will need the following materials: a paintbrush, a semi-wet palette, a water cup, watercolor paper, masking tape, and a work surface such as a clipboard, a table, or an artboard. Recommended materials: a towel, an extra water cup, and an empty palette. There are 3 parts to a paintbrush: the bristles, the handle, and the ferrule. The ferrule is what holds the bristles to the handle. The bristles can be divided into 3 parts: the toe, the belly, and the heel. Toe is the tip of the brush, the belly is the thickest part of the brush, and the heel is the portion of the brush that is inside the ferrule. A semi-wet watercolor palette is what we'll be using in this video. Palette wells hold the pigment. Pigment is the color which is held together by a binder. The binder is usually gum arabic or synthetic glycol. Watercolor paper is thicker than usual drawing paper. It can absorb and withstand water. It comes in sheets or a pad of paper. Water acts as the solvent. In other words, water will both activate the paint and dilute the paint. Fill the cup about 3/4 to avoid spilling. Recommendation: it is useful to use 2 water cups, one to clean your dirty brushes and the other to hold fresh water. Masking tape is used to hold down the paper while painting. It keeps the paper flat and the edges clean. While it is possible to paint without using tape, it can make certain techniques difficult and your paper will warp. Recommended options for a work surface: a clipboard, a level, smooth table, or an adjustable artboard. Part 2. Prepping to paint. Arrange your workspace, prepare your paper, proper paintbrush use, wake up or activate your palette. It is important to set up your space so that all your materials are within reach. Taping your paper is where we'll begin. Begin by tearing off 4 pieces of tape that are longer than the sides of your paper. Stick these pieces to the side of your table so that they are ready to use. If you are using masking tape, the adhesive may be too strong and may tear your paper when you remove it later. To avoid this, stick your tape to your clothing a few times to weaken the adhesive. If you're using artist tape, this should not be an issue. Make sure the tape is even. Check your tape for evenness. Make sure the tape is overlapping the paper by approximately 1/4 of an inch. Before pressing it down, double check to make sure that the tape is parallel to the edge of the paper. Repeat this step for all 4 sides. To properly hold your brush, hold it by the middle of the handle. Do not hold your brush by the ferrule. Always pull the brush in the direction of the heel of the bristles. Do not push your brush against the bristles. Do not jam the bristles downward. Doing this will damage the brush. Avoid over-brushing. Although watercolor paper is designed to hold up to water, brushing with a lot of force and back and forth brushing will break down the paper quickly. Remember to pull, not push. Swirl the brush to clean. Firmly but gently tap the bristles at the bottom of the cup to release the paint from the bristles. Do not smash the bristles downward into the cup. Doing this will damage the paintbrush. To wake up the palette, load your paintbrush with water and drip the water into a paint well to activate the paint. Load your brush with paint by gently dabbing the body of the bristles onto the paint well. Do not stab the paint. Stabbing the paint with the brush will damage the bristles and waste the watercolor paint. Do not scoop the paint. Think of the paint as an ink. You don't need very much pigment to begin painting. Scooping will waste the paint. Part 3. Applying paint to paper. Basic brushing technique. Wet on dry, wet on wet, diluting, layering, switching colors, removing tape. Painting with watercolor requires a different brushing technique than when painting with other types of paints. Think about your paintbrush just as an applicator with which you can move the paint around the surface of the paper. Wet on dry application. Applying watercolor to the surface of a dry paper will create crisp, strong brushstrokes. This is because the surface tension between the water and the dry paper prevents the paint from freely moving around the paper. Wet on wet application. This is called applying a wash. A wash is a layer of water brushed onto the paper to prep it to accept paint. Applying a wash allows you to paint soft brushstrokes onto your paper because the paper has already absorbed some water. There is no surface tension. You can use either plain water or diluted paint for a wash. Diluting your paint. To lighten your color to a more transparent hue, use the lid of your palette or an empty palette to mix water and pigment. Use your brush to pick up water from the fresh water cup and drip it onto your empty palette. Pick up pigment from a paint well by loading the brush. Swirl the loaded brush with the fresh water on the empty palette. This process can be used to mix different ratios of water and pigment and to combine colors. Layering. In order to create a variety of shapes and effects, you must layer watercolor applications. Allow 15 to 20 minutes to dry, or use a hairdryer on a low no-heat setting to speed up the drying time. Switching colors. Remember how to clean your brush? Swirl your brush in the water cup you're using to clean your brush. Firmly but gently, tap the bristles on the bottom of the cup to release the paint from the bristles. Dab your clean brush onto your next color. Load your brush with paint. Removing tape. It's important to wait until your painting is completely dry before you begin removing the tape. Doing this will lessen the chance of tearing the paper. Begin with the last piece that you placed down. Use your finger to pick up the corner of the tape. Grab a hold of the tape. Slowly and firmly pull straight down. Continue to pull the rest of the tape, careful to keep the tape as flat against the work surface as possible. Repeat this process for each piece of the tape, ending with the first piece that you had laid down.